Levantamiento nacional para el derrocamiento de Batista. Caso de no lograrse el levantamiento nacional, o en el caso de que Batista pudiera reaccionar con fuerzas superiores y atacarnos aquí en Santiago de Cuba, la idea nuestra era con las armas del cuartel Moncada marchar a las montañas y librar la guerra irregular en las montañas.
Like the French Revolution, the Cuban Revolution was about spreading wealth to all the people. In 1920, everybody in Cuba was Batista's supporter. Batista had overthrown the fascist president in favor of freedom. After his second term, Batista came to America for 8 years. When he returned to Cuba, he was losing the election for president. He then joined with the army and took over using force, becoming a fascist president himself. Now a few rebels wanted to overthrow Batista and end his presidency. July 26, 1953, these rebels, including the Castro brothers, attacked the barracks in Monica and Bayamo. Only 5 rebels were killed during the attack, but 56 more were captured, tortured, and killed afterwards. The rest, including the Castro brothers, were sentenced to 15 years in prison. 2 years later, they were released due to public pressure on Batista. The revolutionaries then went to Mexico to plan their next attack, where Che joined them. In 1956, a group of revolutionaries arrived in Cuba by boat. Due to excessive weight on their boat, they arrived 2 days late, ruining their plans to coordinate with the other rebels. They tried to go to the Sierra Madre Mountains, but were stopped by Batista's army, who killed all but 20 of the 82 men. The rest, including the Castro brothers, escaped into the mountains. Soon a group of students tried to kill Batista. Batista's army ended up killing most of them. Some of Batista's supporters joined the rebels because they didn't support a president who would kill students. The U.S. also declared an embargo on Batista, saying they would no longer trade with Cuba because they didn't support Batista's decisions. In 1958, the revolutionaries started the Battle of La Plata, lasting 10 days. The rebels lost 3 men, but captured 240 for Batista's army. 10 days later, Batista's troops killed most of the rebels in the Battle of La Mercedes. Because of this disaster, Fidel Castro asked for a temporary ceasefire. By August 8th, Castro and the other rebels had escaped back to the Sierra Madre Mountains. After a short time of planning, the rebels began many small attacks across Cuba. As they slowly converted more and more cities, Batista got scared and left for the Dominican Republic, leaving all of Cuba to Castro. The victorious Castro formed a new government with Manuel Leo as president, but the U.S. kept their embargo because they thought of Castro as communist. The U.S. still today refuses to trade with Cuba. Batista's supporters were put on trial for war crimes such as murder and torture. Many were killed on the spot. Many others were sentenced to a long term in prison. Che was appointed supreme prosecutor in La Habana. His job was to try and find and stop people who were against the new government. Castro himself began to run a fascist government. Many of his supporters, including Che, were unhappy with the result of the revolution. The Cuban Revolution was very different from the American Revolution because, while the American was for freedom, the Cuban Revolution was to equalize the wealth.